our country from breaking apart. I closed the mill and I told the workers that I was answering Lincoln's call, and I suggested that they do the same. Do you know, every single one of them. But history books spend little time on those details and instead reduce a person's life to a single event or two. They say, General Henry Harndon led the 1st Wisconsin Cavalry, captured Jefferson Davis on the 10th day of May, 1865. Henry Harndon, what a hero. Shucks. Civil War history books were written long after the war, and by people who weren't there. I wasn't. Right in the middle of it. So if you lend me your ears, I'd like to tell you the story of events leading up to May 10th, 1865, and then you could judge for yourselves who the heroes of the story really are. The story of the capture of Jefferson Davis begins 4 days earlier, on the evening of Saturday, May 6th. The cavalrymen and I were at resting in camp just north of Macon, Georgia. That evening I received orders to take 150 of my best men, intercept and capture Jefferson Davis. The general had gotten word that Davis and a battery of soldiers, perhaps 600 or 700 strong, were making their way across Georgia to try and regroup with General Kirby and keep this war going. The country we'd be traveling through was warm and little food. 150 men would move much faster than Davis's troops, and the 1st Wisconsin Cavalry were seasoned, ready to ride. We set off immediately and headed towards Savannah. That evening we camped briefly at a large plantation where we foraged for food for the men and horses, and then pushed on. I left Company A, about 30 horsemen there to patrol the vicinity, and rode throughout the night, making it to Marion by daybreak. That's when I told the troops what our mission was. Well, they let out a cheer, but I cautioned them that we may be severely outnumbered. Sunday was warm and the spirits of the men were high. We pushed them again all day, stopping only to water the horses and scrape together some food. At 5 o'clock we reached the town of Dublin, and I ordered the exhausted riders to rest and make camp while a few of us went into town for news. There's something unsettling about the town of Dublin. All the townspeople seemed nice. Perhaps too nice. I received several invitations for dinner and to spend the night in their homes, but something in their eyes made me decline their offer to stay back in camp with the men. Well, I scoured the town before retiring for the evening, but couldn't find a single soul who had seen or heard of Jefferson Davis being in the area. With that news, or lack of news, well, it was clear I was searching in the wrong location, and I planned to set a quick pace for Savannah in the morning. Sometime near midnight, Bill, a colored man who I'd employed for some time, woke me from my sleep. Now, Bill was very intelligent, and an excellent forager who could somehow find chickens and hams when no other forager could. No one knew where he had come from. He just appeared one day and started helping out wherever he could. No one had ever asked. But he proved dedicated and true as steel to me. So when he told me he had spoke to another man who had important information, well, I listened. Now, the other man said that Jeff Davis had passed right through Dublin earlier that day. He'd come over the river and left a large contingent of men on the other side. Apparently, he was planning on having dinner in town, and was scared off by something. Perhaps my pending arrival, and went back over the river in a hurry. Well, I looked to Bill, and he told me I could trust this information. Broke camp at 4 a.m. and continued the pursuit. 5 miles out, we came to the Turkey Creek and a torn-up bridge to slow us down. While the men repaired the bridge, I checked in with several homes in the area. Now, a bright little girl standing by told me she had seen several fancy-dressed gentlemen the evening before. One of them was called Mr. President. With the bridge repaired, we pushed on through the pine forest. Wagon tracks could be seen in the dirt, and we followed them closely until midday, when a thunderstorm broke loose, and the tracks were lost. Nightfall came and the storm worsened. Several trees crashed down around our camp. The men were beat, tired, and soaked to the bone, but we had to push on. Fortunately, the storm passed overnight, and Tuesday morning was cool and pleasant after the rain. At 11 o'clock, we reached the Poor Robin Ferry and crossed over into the town of Abbeville. We paused for lunch and information and discovered that a series of wagons had passed through the evening before during the storm. Now, wagons travel very slow. Cavalrymen, even tired and hungry, we travel a great deal faster. By my estimates, we were only a half day behind. Just as I gave the orders to mount up, 6 or 7 soldiers stormed past us from an intersecting road. They rode us in chase by the devil. We were a bit confused by this, as these were Union soldiers. I wasn't aware that any other troops were in the area. Turns out they were scout soldiers for the 4th Michigan under the command of Colonel Pritchard. Now, Pritchard's orders were to stay in Abbeville, control the town, Fort Robin Ferry, and most importantly, make sure Davis did not cross. Well, I saw no reason not to, so I told Pritchard a detailed account of our mission and how close we were to overtaking Davis. Well, he became quite insistent that I take a large detachment of his men with me, but I wasn't about to mix his company with mine. He wasn't very happy about this, but I didn't have time to waste discussing it. The 1st Wisconsin Cavalry took off down the road following Davis's trail. As the day wore on, the tracks became easier to see. We were getting close. It was still daylight when we rode up to a spot where Davis had stopped for dinner. He had left so recently and quickly that the fires were still burning. And this made me think. A man traveling with 700 soldiers, he doesn't run in fear of 70 horses. The tracks we'd been following didn't show signs of a large party, and the people I'd interviewed said they'd only seen a couple of wagons. Maybe Jefferson Davis had become separated from his escort. Maybe we were riding into a trap. We rode past nightfall and made a dark camp at 9 p.m. We were close. Very close. Davis couldn't be more than an hour ahead of us. Now, I didn't want to wander into his camp blindly with a band of weary men, so we rested for several hours. 3 a.m., May 10th, 1865, I had the troops woken silently with no bugle call. I sent a squad of 7 soldiers led by Sergeant Hussey far ahead to scout the area. Today would be the day. Every man there knew. 2 miles outside of camp, in the darkness of pre-dawn, under a thick layer of ground fog, the first shots rang out. I ordered a charge and quickly came upon Sergeant Hussey. 3 of his men had been wounded. A second volley of shot came toward us, and now we could make out the silhouettes of 20 to 30 horsemen in the mist of the thick woods. They fired again. This time so close, it sounded like hail on the trees around us. And then from our flank, nearly 200 mounted soldiers came over the hill. We were outnumbered at least 3 to 1. "Never mind, boys, we'll whip them yet," I shouted. And we advanced on their positions with our repeating rifles firing as quickly as humanly possible. Well, the horsemen became confused in the darkness, and we pushed them nearly a mile back into a swamp. Just as the sky was brightening, we captured one of the soldiers, and we could finally see our enemy in detail. My blood ran. This was not a Confederate soldier. It was a Union soldier from the 4th Michigan. Pritchard's men. Well, I dashed up the firing line. "Hold your fire! Hold your fire!" The shooting stopped. How could this be possible? We'd been fighting our own men. Pritchard was ordered to stay in Abbeville. Now, to add to the confusion, we found ourselves not 50 yards from Jefferson Davis's camp. We were shooting each other right on top of it. Well, Davis woke when the shooting started and was quite confused himself. You see, he had no soldiers with him. None. He'd been riding with a Texas unit but became separated near Dublin. Now all of a sudden he wakes up and there's a firefight going on outside his camp, and he can't imagine who might be shooting at one another. Facing 2 Union companies, Jefferson Davis surrendered on the spot. Several men from the 4th Michigan died that day, and while none of my men were killed, many of them would wear the wounds of that battle for the rest of their lives. And why? Well, it seems there was a reward placed on Jefferson Davis, $100,000 for his capture. I didn't know about it, and neither did my men, but Pritchard did. And he ordered his men to ride around us and take Davis first. They suspected we were Union soldiers before they ever fired a shot. By the time the matter was sorted out, Congress awarded the money to the 1st Cavalry. They were mustered out of service in July of that year. And that's what happened. That is how Jefferson Davis came to be captured. It's a noble tale with a somewhat less than noble finish. But in the end, the mission was accomplished. I shudder to think what would have happened had Davis gotten away. He would have regrouped with General Kirby, and the war would have kept on going. Many more good men would have died in a war that already had far too many casualties. If Bill hadn't been riding with me that day, well, it's probably what would have come to pass. I would have never known that Davis came through Dublin that day, and I would have turned east in the morning. Now, Bill, not being an official soldier, didn't receive a share of the reward money, although he certainly deserved it. And the day the men were mustered out, I saw Bill leading an old mule down the road. He already had big plans for his future, and I was certain he would do well. So history books will tell you that I am responsible for the capture of Jefferson Davis, or some might even say that the 1st Wisconsin Cavalry assisted the 4th Michigan in the capture. Now you know what really happened on those few days of early May, 1865. And you can judge for yourselves who the heroes really are. I say it's the men who saddled up for one last mission and pushed themselves harder than they ever had before. And the man who was good at finding chickens, who also found the key piece of information that led to the capture and brought this war